Okay, right. We'll make a start, and if people join in, then they can join us as we go. So welcome to the webinar, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So this webinar is about UX best practice for arts and culture venues, as I'm sure you're aware. Um, Before I jump in to just introduce myself, I'll just say to you, if you've got any questions, please post them in the chat. Alternatively, if we've got, for those who aren't pushed for time, if you want to actually have a ask some questions to Connor at the end, then feel free to do so. Just hang around and we can do that. Um, but by way of introduction, my name's Joe. I'm the MD and founder at Chaptr, and Connor is our UX and design director, and he's been with us 10 years. Just a little bit about Chaptr, then we'll jump into the useful stuff. So we've been going 12 years. We work mainly in the creative arts and culture sector, and we're a UX and design led web agency, which means we do build websites, but we focus on a lot of the value comes from the UX and the design side of what we do. That means we work with lots of arts and culture organizations, and we've also developed a good understanding of kind of what makes the websites work well for them, and that predominantly is by focusing in on the user experience. And that's what we're going to talk to you about today. Connor's prepared a great talk, and yeah, we're excited to share this information with you, and hopefully you can take some useful stuff away from the webinar and apply it to your own website. I'll hand over to you now, Connor.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm sure many of you are already very familiar with what UX or user experience actually is, but for anybody who's not so familiar, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the concept. So UX refers to the overall experience a person has when interacting with a product or a system or a service. UX serves as a bridge between users and technology, and it helps to ensure that the experience of our website is a positive one for the user and optimized to deliver business success for the actual organization themselves. There are many different aspects of UX for us to consider, and these include usability, accessibility, performance, design, and emotional response. And I'll be touching on a few of these subjects today. But why does UX matter most of all for arts and culture organizations? Well, typically websites in the arts and culture sector have to serve multiple purposes. These could be things like providing information for in-person visits, detailing culturally relevant content and media, showcasing events, making bookings, the list goes on. What's more, it's usually impossible to pinpoint one distinct user demographic to target. The visitors to cultural venues will often come from all walks of life. They'll have different interests and intentions. They'll have varying levels of competency when it comes to interacting with the website. Therefore, UX is vitally important for organizations in this sector because it enables each of the site's functions to be achieved optimally whilst being understandable and appealing to a diverse audience. And to summarize some key areas where UX can make a positive impact, it can improve conversions and revenue. It can increase accessibility and inclusivity. It can save you time and money. It can enhance user satisfaction and keep them coming back for more. And it can help you reach the right audience, because at the end of the day, if we're not speaking to the right people, then we can never hope to get to where we want to get to. So just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today, we'll be discussing the importance of user research to help understand your audience and enhance their experience. But we'll also be looking at why aligning the internal team of stakeholders plays a vital role in this too. We'll be talking about designing for engagement and inclusivity, and talking about how to optimize for conversions. The information we provide today comes from Chaptr's many years of experience delivering UX optimized websites within this sector. And I'm excited to share some of this knowledge with you, and I hope you'll find this session valuable and informative. Along the way, I'll be throwing in some tips and tricks that you can take away from today's session and apply to your own website. So the first section I'd like to look into is understanding your audience and your own organization. This seems kind of obvious, right? But one of the biggest UX pitfalls I come across is basing decisions on assumptions and not actually on research and data. Assumptions aren't always bad because, after all, stakeholders know their organization well, and it's okay to lean into experience and intuition. It's an important part of any decision-making process. So I'm not saying ignore assumption or experience, but where possible, look to collect and apply user research. User research allows us to understand our users' behaviors, understand their needs, their motivations, and their pain points. Without this knowledge, we risk creating an experience that doesn't communicate in the right way and to the right people. And it's an experience that doesn't allow for the goals of the organization to actually be achieved. There are a number of many different research methods that we can take, and to go through all of this would require a whole new webinar, maybe one for the future perhaps. But here are some really simple ones that can have a big impact with very little effort. So the first one would be card sorting. This helps to create information architecture of the site. You could ask users to organize content into related groups and helps to create logical structure and establish potential content flows across the site. You could conduct task ranking. As you can see from the diagram in the middle of it, it helps to create a really visual representation of different pain points the user has creating common tasks. You can ask separate users to perform tasks such as access FAQs or buy a ticket or find building access information, and they would rank the ease or the efficiency of that task with a simple number and a color code. And it just helps to give really visual feedback to different areas where you could improve. And you can also conduct interviews and surveys, asking simple questions about how the user feels, and it helps to gain great insight into the experience that they have, and it also helps you build a good understanding and picture of the user themselves. If I take this quote, "Pay attention to what the users do and not what they say," I think this is a great reason to conduct multiple different research types. If we simply ask people to say, "How did you feel about this?" or "What did you think of that?" we can, they can often put their own biases on these things. So if you can, look to actually interact with your users, whether they come into the venue or if you can sometimes have sessions where they're interacting with devices, study their behaviors, look at the way they interact with your site, and get the true impact of what you're offering. As previously mentioned, organisations in the arts and culture sector typically attract a wide variety of users. The problem that we have is when we try to be everything to everyone, we dilute our message. But when we try to appeal to a particular user group, we risk alienating those outside of this demographic. A great example of this would be a theatre, for example. Typically a theatre may put on a number of different productions. They may want to try and appeal to some of the more traditional theatre goers. They may wish to put on shows that are related to comedy or maybe to a family, or shows that may have a more serious or adult theme behind them. And so when we try and demonstrate our content on our website, how do we show that our venue or our offering is open to this diverse audience group without putting all of our focus into one particular theme or category or risk alienating one particular demographic? It's a difficult problem to solve, and there isn't really a one size fits all. But one solution I found is finding a common value or need that is shared by all users. And so if I go back to the theatre example, for example, when we go to a theatre, it's of course going and seeing a show and seeing a performance, but it's also the idea of getting dressed up and having a good night out. It's the food, it's the time spent with friends, it's the message that theatre actually represents. It's going for a quality performance and going to be entertained. So a great option, or the way to tailor some of your content, is to look at actually what is the value or the message that potentially aligns all of these different demographics. Because if you can find that, then it often helps to reach or speak to the kind of more human nature of your audience rather than just focusing on individual likes and preferences. Good UX, though, starts from within. And a good experience for our users is built on focused and aligned internal objectives. It's vital that a team within the organisation can agree upon goals and objectives of both the website and the organization as a whole. If stakeholders are pulling in different directions, we risk creating an experience that asks too much of our users without clear hierarchy for completing tasks. Just to give another example of this, if you were to say, look at a cathedral, there's obviously a huge religious aspect to a cathedral and what they offer, but they often provide an awful lot for their local community. They offer tours and different events. There's a huge historical element to a cathedral. And also there's some sort of financial needs that they have as well, whether that's through donating or booking particular ticketed events. Usually within an internal team, there's a different member of the team in charge of these different areas. And actually, if each of these team members has their own preferences and their own desires, that can sometimes translate onto the website themselves. So actually conducting internal reviews and structure for the goals and what we actually want to do as an internal team often manifests itself onto the website, and make sure that the website is actually clear in what we're asking the user to do, because we can't ask them to do everything at once. So how do we structure and how do we create those clear goals? Once the goals of the internal team are aligned, it's important to rank these goals and establish priority. When the user interacts with the site, we want it to be perfectly clear for them what the site is actually asking them to do. And as I just mentioned, if we overload them with too many options without hierarchical balance, we risk creating a site that doesn't deliver on its primary objectives. Therefore, establishing website goal hierarchy is essential for creating an optimized user experience. And you can do this really easily within your internal team. There are a few common UX exercises you could run by getting a team of internal stakeholders together and just by talking through these ideas. So, start with an open discussion to generate ideas. And then you could use something called affinity diagrams to link related ideas and topics. When there's a lot of ideas being thrown around, it's hard to kind of, it's hard to narrow things down and create connections. So using affinity diagrams helps to link these different ideas. Then using an exercise such as post-ups and forced ranking helps to visualize these connected ideas and goals. And by having some open and honest discussions with forced ranking helps us to establish this internal alignment. And then at the end of this, being sure that the goals of our organization actually match the goals of our website. Again, this alignment is so important, because we're asking the website to do one thing, but actually that doesn't match those goals of the organization. Then that misalignment manifests itself onto the website and manifests itself onto our users, who ultimately end up being confused about what you're asking them to do. So the next section I want to discuss is designing for engagement and inclusivity. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I've just completely lost where I am. Bear with me 2 seconds. So engagement is actually just one part of the wide. Sorry, this talk will focus primarily on accessibility, but I do want to make a quick reference to inclusive design, as I think it's a valuable consideration for arts and cultures organisations. Inclusive design is the approach that aims to make products and services relatable and usable by as many people as possible. Accessibility forms a big part of this, but inclusive design also considers factors such as ability, language, culture, gender, and age. It involves understanding and embracing human diversity to create solutions that are flexible, adaptable, and considerate of all of different user needs. Here are some ways you can incorporate inclusive design principles into your website. Multi-language support. It sounds really simple, but it's something that often gets overlooked. Diverse representation in media, content, and design. Again, it's quite a simple change, but is often overlooked. And if we can't, as an individual, see ourselves represented in the content that we're consuming, then it makes it automatically harder to relate to it. And using inclusive language as well. Again, let's avoid assumption. If we can use language that doesn't have jargon or doesn't have technical terms that people find hard to understand, then that's an easy way to help us be more inclusive. But of course, accessibility, which is the hot topic of this webinar. Accessibility is a fundamental aspect of inclusive design. It's the practice of designing and developing websites so that disabled people can understand, navigate, and interact with websites effectively. Typically, organisations in the arts and culture sector are open to the public. The consumers of the organisation, both online and in the real world, have a variety of needs and preferences. Therefore, achieving a good standard of accessibility is an absolute non-negotiable. Applying accessibility standards is essential to ensure that everyone has equal access to what the organisation has to offer and is able to experience its offering with equal efficiency and effectiveness. Accessibility covers all kinds of user requirements. This includes users who have physical and mobility disabilities, are blind or have low vision and are deaf or hard of hearing, are neurodivergent, use a screen reader, and are dyslexic, and of course many more. There are many ways we can incorporate accessible design principles into our websites. And I encourage anyone who isn't already familiar with accessibility principles to learn more about it. For now, here are some simple yet effective considerations that you can use to improve the accessibility of your website from today. But again, I must touch on these are just sort of scratching the surface, and I would encourage anybody to look into this further. So one way to do this is to use alt text to describe images and provide transcripts for videos. The users using a screen reader, then providing alt text allows our visual content to be described accurately. Use good color contrast and readable font sizes. Again, if the user's struggling to read and actually consume what we're trying to say, then the message just isn't going to get across. Make actions large and clickable and don't require precision. Again, for any assistance device is needed, then really small call to actions and actions are just going to be really difficult to use, if not impossible. Make actions large and clear with what they're trying to do. Design for keyboard or speech only use. Don't rely on mouse movement only. A really common practice that I see on websites is accordions. I'm sure you're all familiar with that, where it says click to see more or reveal hidden content. And whilst this can keep designs looking clean and clutter-free, it is really difficult for people to use, and hidden content just isn't great for things such as screen readers. Use a combination of color, shape, and text to indicate interactions. We've all seen it when you hover over a button and you click a button, and it may just be a simple color change or something like that. But for some people, that simply isn't enough to actually show them that the button's been clicked or the button's been interacted with. Consider a change of text, such as selected, or an arrow tick, or a change of shape to indicate that that interaction's actually occurred. Use linear and logical layouts. I always say predictability is key. Nobody wants to be guessing about where they're going to look or where they think things should be. It's really helpful just as a consumer to be able to read sites and consume sites with predictability. But then for people with access needs, it's a really, again, helpful tool to just consume content in a logical, sensible order. You can also consider configuration plugins like Accessibility. We partner with Accessibility, but there are also others out there, and it's just a really simple way for anyone accessing the site to configure the site settings to the needs that they require, and it's just a really quick and simple win. And of course, design with mobile and touchscreen in mind, which leads me nicely on to my next point. Responsive design consideration. So at Chaptr, we design with desktop and mobile versions at the same time, as opposed to just what we hear, such as a mobile first approach or a desktop first approach. As I think in 2025, a website should look great and perform well, regardless of the device it's being viewed on. As an arts and culture organisation, it's important that you consider how your content and features appear and function across different screen sizes. If your site features a lot of video and image, consider how these will appear in landscape and portrait orientations. Are the images and video frames set to the right aspect ratio to avoid black bars or cropping? If your site uses filters and search events, consider the complexity of the UI. Can the user interact with the filter on a small touchscreen device with the same precision as they would do with a mouse on a desktop? If you have a large site with multiple levels of subpages, consider how the menu structure and page access routes will work on mobile. Can the user discover and access less prominent content easily and organically? And the last topic I want to touch upon in this section is a little trick I've picked up that often helps to improve user engagement. I always think we should consider our digital presence in the same way we consider our real world experience. I believe we should treat our digital audience with the same human value as we would visitors in the real world. Sometimes something that makes us all uniquely human is our ability to feel emotion, and playing on emotion can be a useful tool to help drive engagement. If your organization offers a particular event or an experience or a service, consider the emotional value of what you're actually offering. Is the visitor coming to be entertained, for example, to laugh, to feel a sense of excitement, or to be thrilled? Is your visitor coming to learn, to feel a sense of accomplishment, or to be inspired? And I'd encourage you to try and look beyond simply saying, this is what we do, and this is how much it costs, for example. Consider the emotional and human value that you have to offer, and look to clearly demonstrate this in impactful ways across your site. And this can be done in the visual content, it can be done with the language that we used, it could be done through things like testimonials and reviews. And again, it comes back to this sort of human nature and about representation. If, as a user of your site, I can see a representation of me and I can consume this clearly, and that content that I'm consuming triggers a certain emotion, and that can often have an awful lot of impact and deliver an awful lot of value, and can really help to drive engagement. And there's definitely something to consider. And that leads me on to our next subject, which is optimizing for conversions. Website conversions are pivotal in turning passive visitors into active participants and customers. Conversions occur when a user completes a desired action that aligns with the objectives of the organization. A site can have many different desired actions, as we know is common with arts and culture sites. In relation to this sector, these could be booking an event or making a donation, purchasing a membership, or even just reading a news article, to name a few. Poorly considered UX can have significantly negative effects on website conversion rates. Your organization could have the best content and host awesome events and provide the best value for your user. But if the pathway to completing conversions is a poor experience, your users will simply become frustrated, disengaged, and your conversion rate will drop. I'm going to share a few simple yet effective UX principles that can positively impact conversions. And I'll demonstrate these in reference to making an event booking, as this typically is a common desired action that we see across many arts and culture sites. And so that starts with event navigation, and quite a common feature is tagging and filtering and searching events. If you're an organization that has many different events, perhaps these occur over, repeat on a daily basis or happen over a long amount of time, you'll perhaps have event pages that are very long and have lots of different events, and some of these may be of a greater priority to you than others. Or as a user, I may wish to see certain events and not be sort of view the events that I'm not interested in. So something to consider is tagging and filtering and search features in order to allow the events that the user wants to see to be accessed with ease, and they're not left sifting through pages and pages of stuff they don't want to see. And as I just touched upon lightly there, as an organization, you may have particular high ticket events that you want to push, but perhaps a particular event that's occurring over a period of time, or a particular feature event that you really want to drive your traffic to. So you could consider incorporating things such as a highlights page or a featured events page on the home feed on the home page of your site. Being able to tag or pin events to these particular feeds means that the users can't help but see these particular events. And Of course, you don't want to overdo these because we don't want to be force feeding users stuff that they don't want to see. But it does help to perhaps pin certain events to the top of a feed, or make sure that the first thing that a user hits when they access our site is the stuff that they want to see. The next way to optimize booking journeys is to simplify the booking flow itself. Of course, less steps seems pretty obvious, but what I'd say is less steps, but effective steps. What we don't want to do is cut corners and make sure that the user is jumping too far ahead and missing out key information, or we're avoiding losing out on capturing key information. But we also don't want to bog down the process and cause our users to just simply drop off and lose their way. So what I'd offer advice on is creating less steps for the booking process, but effective steps that make sense and are logical. I'd also encourage use of progress indicators. It's always helpful for our users to be actually able to see how far along the process that they are. Are they on step 1, step 2? Are they approaching the final stages? And this just helps them to keep on track of where they are, and again reduces the risk of drop-offs. And the other technique I have this is splitting out long forms. I think we've all been there when we've making a booking and we come across a form and it's just fields and fields and fields of different content to collect, and it becomes a massive drag. Of course, we need to collect the content that we need to collect, but splitting out a form into different steps or bite-sized chunks helps the user to process the information a little bit more effectively, and again reduces the drop-offs. You can also look to create an optimized and a personal experience within the booking process. UX goes beyond just designing and what we see and how we feel. It also incorporates parts of the development and the site and performance. And so if our sites themselves are weighty and are bogged down, and the process between loading pages is slow, again, that creates extra friction and encourages our user to just simply walk away. You could consider incorporating things such as express checkouts, things like Apple Pay and things like that, that people can use on their phone. It's becoming more and more popular, and I'd encourage use of that where you can. Look to incorporate things such as tailored offers. I know Spectrix have a really great feature where they actually suggest donation amounts based on the user's value of their basket. If a user's put in quite an expensive basket, Spectrix will actually suggest a donation amount that's an increase on someone with less value in their basket. There are other examples of this, but it's a great idea to look at where you can incorporate tailored offers into your offering, and also look to incorporate cross-sell opportunities within that booking process as well. What I'd encourage you not to do is incorporate too many more steps for the user to take, or hoops to jump through, but you're missing a trick if there aren't parts along that booking journey where you can look to incorporate things like memberships and donations or programs. Are there connections you can make between the digital and the real world? If you're a theatre or a cinema, for example, are there sellable items on the night that you can incorporate into the website? For example, drinks and food and programs, different things like that. There are different ways we can entwine the digital and the real world experience. But it's also important to remember accessible alternatives as well. Remember that maybe some people don't have the ability to come onto the site and book, and actually having clear phone numbers and accessible alternatives to help achieve bookings as well is an appropriate alternative. Strategic use of design. Clear action messaging is a really important one, and it's something that I see done not particularly well quite often. Really simple messaging, telling the user what they're doing when they click that action is essential. Buy tickets, take the next step, submit the form. Don't make these too long, too big. Don't make these too vague. Tell the user what you're asking them to do. Create a clean and clutter-free interface. I think that speaks for itself, really. And then predictable layouts as well. Again, when we're going through that booking process, if I'm on one screen and then I click to the next screen and it's looking different, 1 minute the pay button's in the top left and then the confirm button's in the bottom right. it's just it's creating less trust, and it's more confusing for the user. And trust and credibility as well. Try incorporating things such as trust signals, reviews, testimonials, all those sorts of things, quotes from users, helps to build trust, it helps to build credibility, and optimizes those conversions. Consistent branding in UI, and it ties back to the point I made about the predictable designs. If I'm going through a booking process and it looks one way on one screen, and I go to pay and it's got different fonts, it's got different colors, it looks a bit different, that immediately is a bit concerning for me and may potentially turn me away. It's great to supply secure payment options, of course, and also form validation as you go through. No one likes filling out a form and getting right the way to the end, and then suddenly discovering that, okay, it's not loading, it's not going to the next step. Have form validations, tell the user when they've entered a field correctly, when they've got a field wrong, so that form entering, or the most, let's face it, the most boring part of the process of booking, let's make that easy, let's make that efficient. And of course, continue to test and improve. The web is constantly evolving, the need and the interests of our users is constantly evolving. Don't settle for what you've got. Continue to seek out customer feedback, continue to test what you've got, and look for constant improvements, because I can assure you that things do become outdated pretty quickly, and that's not just on bad practice from ourselves, it's because our users' interests change, it's because technology changes. So constantly seek feedback, constantly test and improve and refine. So I just want to summarize with some key takeaways from today, because I know I've waffled on about quite a lot here. So the first part is captivate the right audience. The best way we can reach a diverse audience is to appeal to their common need or common value. But in order to achieve this, we need to take user research to help understand our audience. And none of this is possible if we aren't aligned in our own internal goals, and we can't manifest our own internal aims and ambitions on the website itself, because it's just going to end up being counterproductive. Accessibility is non-negotiable. There are countless ways we can integrate accessibility and inclusive design principles to ensure our website is relevant and usable for as many people as possible. There's some quick wins that you can do, but I would encourage you to go away and look more into this, and that's something we can certainly help with as well. And ensure your site's optimized for conversions. Your site has to be an accessible, enjoyable experience. Don't create unnecessary barriers for your users, and ensure your site is optimized for conversions. Any questions? Oh, and I'm open to if anybody doesn't want to sort of speak out in the chat, speak out. Please feel free to put the question in the chat channel. Equally so, if you want to shout out some questions at me, that's absolutely fine. I'm happy to answer anything. Actually, having said that, Vanessa, do you mind actually giving me a hand in unmuting everyone?
Sure. Give me 1 second. We do have an initial question while we get started, Connor. In fact, it looks like you'll need to unmute them, I'm afraid. But we have an initial question, which is for aligning stakeholders right in the beginning. You were talking about ways to get alignment with the various members of the team. Is this alignment process something that people can do in-house? And if so, how do we connect with various stakeholders who might have very different views and struggle to see eye to eye? So if we can't get signed up for a workshop, do you have any recommendations for how we can get internal alignment?
Yeah, absolutely. So we at Chaptr run our own workshops, but they can be and are something that can be done within the internal team. This can be done. Obviously, I always think in person's absolutely great. I think especially for UX exercises, because I find you get the most benefit when these sessions are interactive, when people are able to write, when people are able to express, when you're able to pin up your ideas and visualize your ideas. And earlier on in the talk, let me go back to the slide. let me find the right slide that I was on, sorry. This, I spoke about affinity diagrams and post-ups and force rankings, and these are specific UX tasks that you can undertake. But it's basically, they can be really, really simple. It's writing on post-it notes, it's drawing diagrams, it's even drawing pictures or different user flows throughout the site. I'm not disguising the fact that people are obviously going to have different opinions. There are difficult conversations that have to be had, and that's something for the internal team to resolve. But if you do things such as affinity diagramming, helps to relate related pieces of content, or helps to build bridges between different members of the team. So if you have a booking team, is there ways that we can relate the booking team with the box office team, with the donations team, and relate those ideas, and then by forming those relations and then ranking them, it helps to just build empathy, build connections, and just helps visualize the difficult conversations that need to be had. And I hope that helps. And I'm gonna have to unmute everyone. I'm still working out how to do that. Okay.
Thanks for that, Connor.
Yeah, actually, I found out how to unmute everybody. So yeah, bear with me a sec.
If you do have any questions, please do raise your hand and have a chat.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. So Sarah, thank you for your input. I see you've really resonated with a lot of what Connor's shared. I'm glad that we could endorse and validate some of your existing thinking. Let us know if you'd like to talk through some of those quick wins and just maybe sense check or bounce some ideas around. We'd love to have a chat about accessibility with you. Alex has a question for you, Connor, which is, can you talk a little bit about your Bristol Cathedral case study, specifically some of the benefits of your redesign unlocked for both the team and the visitors there? It's a great example of people coming to a site for different reasons, like for worship or spirituality, concerts, and history.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you know, I referenced the cathedral example in the talk itself, and that was based very much purely on our experience with Bristol Cathedral. I think cathedrals are a particular challenge because there is, of course, there's the religious factor to it as well, which is the primary purpose of the cathedral, and it's something that we have to be very sensitive to around a lot of the way we speak and the content that's on the site. And so there is a balance to be found. So balancing that amongst the kind of more practical elements of what a cathedral is. There's the history aspect of it, there's the events, there's donations, there's all of those different parts that we had to factor in, and that was a challenge when we started work with Bristol Cathedral. But we undertook the UX exercises that I spoke about today. We met with them as a team and ran through a lot of these exercises and just help them align and work out what they were actually asking their site to do for them as a team, and also the users coming for it. And so from that, we were able to create a structure throughout the site and assign different prominence to different content within the site. So that allowed us to say, right, this is what we want to put on the homepage. But then from the homepage, how do we access these different strands? So if I was visiting as someone enthusiastic and interested about history, how do I find out about that without being caught up in the religious aspect, which I actually may not be interested in? And so that helped us to create information architecture for the site. We use like tiered systems to create navigation and drop-down menus. So actually, although there were certain things on the homepage that had to go there, we could get the user to other areas of the site within one click or within one hover state. It was clear that actually this is the next access route, and this is how we need to go. One of the particular challenges with Bristol was the fact that they have daily religious events that go onto their events feed. And naturally, when these occur multiple times every single day, when you go onto their events feed, it can, I don't want to say be clogged up, but the particular religious events fill it up quite quickly. And so if you have a particular event that may only be on for a particular period of time, maybe this event needs a bit more prominence because it's a particular, for an economic value, it's a ticketed event. One of the challenges we faced was actually how do we bring out these particular individual events to the fore, and make them stand out from just the day-to-day religious services, but whilst also giving prominence to those religious services, because there's a huge amount of people that want to just come on and see when a particular service is happening and be able to know when that's happening. So finding a balance was a particular challenge in this case, and something that we incorporated onto Bristol's site was a filtering system where the user can access what's on today with one click. There's a highlight system where the user can click on highlights and just see particular pinned and tagged events that Bristol want the user to see. And there's also different feeds dotted around the site on particular landing pages that pull through tagged events that are only related to that particular landing page. So for example, if you are only interested in tours or history, you can go onto the tours or history page and you will find out about their tours and history, but then down that page there's a feed with only pulling through tours and history. So there's multiple. One of the key features that we discussed is accessing the content the user needs through multiple routes, so they're never stuck going down channels and hitting dead ends. If you want to access events, you can go onto the events page. If you're organically browsing the site and just interested in history, you can be on the history page, but then actually history events are being pulled through. It's about never creating bottlenecks, never creating dead ends, but creating an organic journey throughout the site where information is fed through logically and with hierarchy and with order. I hope that answers your question, Alex. If there's anything more specific you want me to go into, I'm more than happy to. No problem. Are there any more questions from anybody?
We did have, I think, Alex, I'm not sure if this is included in the answer that Connor's just given you, but you've also said, do you have any insights on the best practices to highlight charity messaging and enabling donations up front versus embedding in the transaction and checkout journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is quite a common balance that we try to find with arts and cultures organisations. It's that balance between being a hard sell and a bit too pushy, but also actually saying to the user, we like donations, we rely on donations, and making that clear and accessible. What I would say, and in my experience, is that there's no harm in being direct with that. I find a tool that's useful to have, and we often see, is having a direct donate link or call to action in the header itself. I think it's common practice and good to see, and therefore that link to donate is accessed on every single page wherever the user is. As you said, it can also be incorporated as part of the booking process. If I'm booking a ticket, along that journey, there could also be a bit that actually says, add this donation amount, and as I said, Spectrix offer that as well. But what I find is a nice balance for all of this is actually creating a donations landing page, if you like, or a donations area of the site, where you can talk about what the donation actually does and gives a little bit of context behind it as well. And I find that creates a balance between the more direct approach and then being a little bit more human with it as well. But I don't see any harm in making it really obvious and adding a donate now to the top of the page. I think it's really impactful.
Was whether there's any kind of top tips or cheat sheet or something like that on accessibility, accessibility principles, or is there training available on that you would recommend or that we could run?
I'm sorry, Vanessa, I think I missed the first part of that.
Oh, sorry. So the question was, is there any kind of cheat sheet or training on accessibility principles that people might be able to access?
Yeah, I mean, what I always say is accessibility and accessible design is a bit of a sort of spectrum. It's the most accessible website is one where you ultimately make compromise to the design and the visuals. And so what I always say to our clients is adopt the best accessibility practices, and find the balance that you want to find. And that has to be a personal preference. I wouldn't say there's necessarily a cheat sheet, but there are definitely a whole range of things that you can do, from really quick wins, which would just be simply changing things like the copy on your site, um, going through and ensuring, as I mentioned on this part of it, um, you know, making sure your text is the right size and you have contrast there, making sure the call to actions are big enough. There's really kind of quick wins that you can have. And so I wouldn't necessarily call this a cheat sheet, but I'd definitely say there's quick things that you can do. And honestly, these are really accessible on Google to find, and are things that you could do and incorporate today. But what I would say as well is definitely seek out a more in-depth accessibility review. That's something that we do offer in partnerships with, our accessibility partner, to take it that extra step. There's the sites that we design and do hit accessibility best practices, and as I said, it's somewhat of a spectrum. You can do quick wins today. We can come in and achieve accessibility best practices, or even partnering with an expert, and it can take you that extra step further. But I'd encourage going on Google, doing some research, and just sort of put, having two web browsers open, look at what this is saying compared to your website up next to it. Are you doing the things that are really quick wins? Are the buttons big enough? Is the contrast there? Are your images reflective of the proper inclusivity? And then I guess actually, if there was one quick win that was possible, then it's to consider configuration plugins like Accessibility. There is I think a monthly or an annual subscription to Accessibility. And I wouldn't just say do this alone and it will solve all of your problems, because it goes far beyond that. But what things like Accessibility does is there's an icon in the bottom of your screen. The user can come onto that, and it basically then overrides, your settings, and they can configure the website to their needs. So if you did want to have an instant, really immediate impact, then something like that would be helpful.
Alex, I think you may have come off mute for a minute there. Thanks for that, Connor. Yeah, there's obviously a lot to consider with accessibility, like Connor said. And I think sometimes it comes down to weighing up what you're trying to achieve with your with the overall goal for your website. And a lot of one of the common themes that comes across when we talk to clients and they're thinking about redoing their site is, you know, we want it to be engaging, we want it to have a narrative and tell a story and kind of interactive in places. And that, if that's the overwhelming important theme, then there does have to be some concessions made for accessibility. But you can still be, sympathetic to some of the basic standards for accessibility, like adding descriptions and alt tags to your images. And a lot of the time, multiple people are uploading images to the site. So you can include, especially in WordPress, you can include features so that it's hard coded to prompt you to add alt text to your images. It's such a common thing that people forget to do. But if you can't save the page without adding a decent description and alt text, then you're going, that's something you could do to really make a difference. But I think the thing to remember with accessibility as well is that it and UX is it doesn't stop with when you get your new website. If you're producing content, if you're uploading content, it's kind of it's a bit of an ongoing journey, and you need to come up with a bit of an internal user guide for your team, really, about how we maintain those accessibility standards in our copy, in the content we're uploading, so that all the hard work you do in creating the site originally doesn't kind of degrade over time. So, did anyone else have any questions? There's been some really great ones here so far that Connor's answered. If you've got any particular problems with your site at the moment that you wanted to talk through, or just sense check with us, we've still got a little bit of time, so very happy to do that if there's anything specific that you wanted to talk about. Gonna double check if we've got anything else.
I think we've got one more, Joe and Connor, which was, what do you recommend for getting customer feedback? So towards the end of your slides, you were talking about customer feedback, but at the beginning you were saying it's more important to watch what users do rather than what they say, because they might not always know how they end up using the site. So do you have any tools or techniques that you recommend for getting customer feedback on your website before or during or even after UX change?
Yeah, definitely. So again, there's many different types of feedback that we can get, and obviously I'm aware that there are logistical kind of barriers to this. It's quite hard, you're not just going to walk around to somebody in the street with your device open, say, and interact with my website. That could be a little bit strange. But if you did have a venue that people are coming into, then you could set up particular you could ask people to use the website in your venue, set up on a device, and use like a ranking system such as this one, the task ranking, and just sort of say, when they're on the device, can you book an event? Can you access the contact page? And then ask them, these sorts of questions, and get their feedback on that. But whilst they're doing that, actually observe their behavior. Actually, are they hovering too long on a certain thing? Is it taking them a little while to access the menu and actually understand that? Because our bodies don't lie with this sort of stuff. So although they may sort of think, yeah, this is really easy, actually, you can assess for yourself. And obviously being in there in the room is helpful to do that. But I also appreciate that that's not always possible. So there are online tools. I believe one is called, they can be slightly expensive, but they're definitely helpful. There's Maze, which I'll put in the chat. Let me find. So I'll put this in the chat. Yeah, they have absolutely loads of really great testing tools. I think there's one on here as well where you can actually get people to record themselves. They have their own kind of bank of testers, and you can send them your product, send them your wireframes, your prototypes, and actually get them to interact with it, and they can record themselves interacting it, do your screen shares and stuff like that. I'd say that this is quite an in-depth way of doing it, and may not be for everybody. But if you don't have a public space for people to come into and interact, if you don't have the method of actually creating that kind of real world interaction, then there are digital ways of doing it as well. But yeah, just if you can, get people to interact with it, and it can be anybody. It can be, I've done it in the past of asking my mum, asking my grandparents, asking my brother, asking the people. These people don't have necessarily experience of your site, then they don't have the bias. And if your people you're asking, your friends, your family, if they can't access it, then you can assume that actually the public can't either. But there's loads of different ways of doing it.
Thanks for that, Connor. Vanessa, were there any other questions before I just round things up?
No, that's all. Thanks, Joe.
Yep, just to say a big thank you to everyone again for coming along and joining us. Yeah, we are offering up a free UX discussion with you. If you want to get in touch, you can drop me an email at joe.perkins@chaptr.studio, and yeah, we'll be really happy to chat more about it with you. And we've also recorded this webinar, so I'm happy to follow up and send across a recording if that's useful to you as well. But otherwise, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep, thank you, everyone.